But there is another one that you and I got to catch before we went to Sundance that had a lot of people talking, and that is a movie called Mean Girls. That is not an adaptation of the movie. It is an adaptation of the Broadway musical, which is an adaptation of the movie. And then we saw the movie, and we're like, nah, this is straight up the 2004 one because you're literally ripping lines, and you got Tina Fey. It's the same thing again.
Yeah.
I think it's a rights issue, which we'll get into, about how much of it can you retain depending on who the writer is, because you even reminded me that this is also based off of a book. So you got Mean Girls on top of Mean Girls on top of Mean Girls. Out of all the Mean Girls content that we've gotten out there, where does this rank for you? I know you haven't seen the play yet, but
No.
Especially in terms of the original, in terms of this one actually having songs, where does it sit for you?
It definitely ranks below the original for me, and I think a lot of that has to do with this one's deference to the original, because it seems like the thing that they're really trying to highlight here are like, we brought back all your favorite lines, but we kind of like underlined them, highlighted them, put a spotlight over them, so you make sure you see it. Like
Literally put a spotlight over one of them. It was embarrassing.
Yeah, I mean, it's stuff like you go Glen Coco, which like kind of organically develops into this like hilarious little joke, because it's just kind of a little throwaway moment in the original, gets like repeated and like made into a big musical moment because people remember. Yeah, and I'm really struggling to think like how would somebody who isn't familiar with the original think about this one, because it feels in a lot of ways like they're just kind of like rushing through the story. They're reminding you, oh yeah, remember this part happened in the original, so let's get back to the musical stuff. And it doesn't feel, the story doesn't feel as organic as it did in the 2004 version. And beyond that, there's just like very little that I can think of in this year's version that improved upon the original, right? Like, none of the songs are that catchy. I tried putting a couple on in the car to see if you would even notice them, but they're so background. And there's a moment where they kind of make Regina George's downfall intertwined with the talent show a little bit more, which maybe streamlines the plot a little bit. Aside from that, I just feel like everything sort of lessens the impact of that original movie. The Mean Girls don't feel quite as reflective of, actual high school dynamics. It feels less insightful about youth culture. The characters are significantly less distinctive. Renee Rapp might be the only one who really kind of jumps off the screen, but even so, I feel like her Regina George isn't nearly as interesting as Rachel McAdams' Regina George. I didn't have a bad time watching it, but I just didn't really see a reason for it to exist.
I think Renee Rapp is the best part of the movie. I think she rivals Rachel McAdams. I don't think she's better than Rachel McAdams, but I also think I have a lot in the bank for Rachel McAdams, and also the career that she's had. She's just started. Renee has just been, killing it with press interviews, and obviously she was also in Mean Girls, I think in the same part, if I'm not mistaken. So she kind of has that history with it. I thought she was really good in the role. She stood out a lot. I thought the changes they made for her character as well also really worked. This feels like, you remember the early 2000s, 2010s, when they would make like a superhero movie that was already made 10 years ago, but they were going to lose the rights. So they just start like rehashing everything that they need to make sure that they have it. That's what this feels like for the 04 movie. And I want to make sure it's the 04 movie. Like, what is the point of it? They, like you were mentioning, they're saying lines just to make sure that they have it on the record on the screen again, so that the money keeps going their way. It's like a reminder of,
you can print new merch.
Instead of creating a new line for people to repeat, they're worried like who creates that new line and who gets that money. So they're like repeating lines. Like, I understand the iconography of it, but like, why aren't you creating something new? You created new music, right? But even the music is still for the most part staying the same. I don't think they did anything too interesting that they didn't do in the play, and that's insane. That you have the medium of film to edit in post-production, and the play did a better job with the musical staging, and they're limited to like literally being right in front of you. And most of these songs deal with tech. I think we've had other movies. I would even say one of our favorite shows, American Vandal, was able to use that TikTok, Instagram feel a lot better. There's something really recent. I know there's a lot of Sundance stuff, but something in the middle where they were able to investigate something through TikTok. It's probably something like Missing, where they were able to showcase one sequence all in one go. And I thought the Halloween party here, the song was not good enough to have bland visuals.
No.
But then they give you bland visuals.
Yeah,
one of the best songs in this movie is one in the closet. Why is it in the closet?
Right.
In the closet next to socks. Like,
they really do struggle to make these musical numbers visually interesting. I did like the one bit in Sexy Halloween where they incorporated some of like the TikTok choreography where people do like the seamless cut stuff, but that's literally like a fleeting moment.
I know it was your favorite song. That was the one Zach had on A/B repeat.
It's literally the only one whose title I could remember, which I think speaks poorly of the movie. But just those musical sequences, they do this thing. First of all, they shoot all the musical sequences in widescreen, which just I don't know. I
take you to this theater specifically because I'm like, bro, it's the one Dolby that's going to fit the screen the way it should be. Then we get there and there's like a black border around the screen. Nerd stuff, I know, but what's the point of it? This movie changes aspect ratios a ridiculous amount of time. Sometimes interesting, sometimes like you're saying, what's the point? So the movie's like, why? Like it's tall when it's regular, and then it'll do the black bars when they're singing.
For the musical numbers, yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously there's like cell phone footage that they're going to do a lot of. I don't know. It's
disorienting a little bit.
It's disorienting. And it would have been fine if they did something more interesting with it. And I just don't think that they were like as creative as they could be.
Yeah.
If there are moments in the Ben Platt one, just terrible movie, just horrible.
Dear Evan Hansen.
Thank you. You already know. Dear Evan Hansen. If that movie was more creative than you were, there's a problem.
That's the thing, right? Like they do a lot of tracking shots, and look, I'm a sucker for a good one shot, but these are not good one shots. Like the camera moves so lethargically that I feel like it struggles to keep up with the different aspects of the dance numbers.
Throw so much.
Yeah, you feel like you're catching like either the very end of somebody doing an impressive dance beat or like just sort of glancing over it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just like to me, it doesn't match the momentum of the songs. It feels so slow and plodding and there's energy in this musical and it's not reflected in the way they shoot it.
Mm-hmm. Because you'll have those moments. There's this hallway one where I think that they're prepping the plan on how they're going to get back to Regina. For those of you who don't know the story of Mean Girls, you have a new girl from South Africa, which has been a recurring joke in this past week about South Africa. People not knowing who
Shout out Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Who comes from South Africa. And she gets entwined with the Mean Girls and eventually tries to come up with a plan to take over the Mean Girls and in particular take down the biggest one of them all, which is Regina George. They have this massive song in that hallway sequence that we're talking about where so much is happening on screen. And like you mentioned, it moves so slow that it's like you're rushing and you're dragging at the same time. It's this weird tempo that they have going on with it. You talked about my girl immediately as we left. Angry Rice is a great actress.
Angry Rice.
They just have not given her the roles that she deserves. She has been the side character in these Spider-Man movies. She was great in The Nice Guys. She was fantastic in Mare of Easttown. I'll even give her this Honor Society one. You could see a little bit of the spunk that she can really put forward if you give her a good script. It's rough. She's already playing an American when it's supposed to be a South African. And then this girl, I think, is British, if I'm not mistaken. There was a lot that was not going to help her out. But I did think Moana in the movie was really good. I thought her songs were decent. She also has a fluffed up storyline from the original.
Yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, a big problem with the Angry Rice role is they really, in trying to make it so deferential to the original, plus adding in these kind of drab songs, they really remove any hints of a personality from her character. Like the Lindsay Lohan version of this character like was kind of a nerd and was kind of awkward and she's just more like Angry's more like a blank slate in this movie, which maybe she could have brought a little bit more, but I think it's really the writing letting her down.
Yeah, because she's just cosplaying what was already out there, and that's what it feels like. It feels like you're watching a cover band, and the cover band does a decent job with it, but at the end of the day, it's still a cover band. You can tell that they are saying somebody else's jokes, and I wish that they would have put a little bit, I don't know, more originality, a new Glenn Coco, something different that the new generation could have gotten, but hey, the new generation still has the 04 version, so catch that if you can, and if you want a mixture of that and the Broadway play, then you have Mean Girls playing in theaters, should be on Paramount Plus, if I'm not mistaken, eventually. So keep your eyes out for that.